Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey, thank you, Lytic7. Preemptive like, original link to the video top the description, below that link to the Discord. Do I have to reload again? It's good. Let's go. Why was Italy so fragmented in the Middle Ages? Italy has been a giant... It's been filled, fog of war, like in a video game. It's been a very much a blind spot in my learning the history of Europe. So this is a good video to catch up on that. My name's Connor. I like to learn. If you're not ready to learn, you're in the wrong class, my friend. Let's go. Kings and Generals, awesome channel. Did I say everything? Original link to the video, top description, Discord stuff.
During the late Middle Ages, the map of Europe was dominated mostly by large feudal kingdoms and principalities, ruled by monarchs who either directly or through their vassals controlled vast swaths of territory. There were, however, some exceptions to this rule, one of which being the peninsula of Italy. Ironically, the land which had once been the center of a united empire which dominated from Britain to Mesopotamia was, throughout the Middle Ages, one of the most politically splintered regions in Europe. In this video, we will discuss Italy's fragmentation and explore the reasons behind why Rome's erstwhile heartland spent the Middle Ages divided among tiny city-states and dominated by foreign powers. Maybe we can do better. There's now a chance to get some territory next to ours to form a unified...
Whatever the things that I watch, always make sure to use their links if it interests you, alright?
Kings and Generals realm. What am I talking about? It's our sponsor, Established Titles. They sell small plots of land in Scotland, which are sought after because of a historic Scottish custom where landowners are referred to as lairds, or lords and ladies in English. But to protect these lands, a tree is planted with every order, and Established Titles supports charities like One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future, so it's a fun and novel way to preserve the natural woodlands of Scotland, while helping global reforestation efforts. You'll get at least 1 square foot of land in Scotland with a unique plot number and a certificate to prove it. This allows you to officially get Lord or Lady on your credit cards, plane tickets, and more. You can also get maps to show your new estate, including the immensely detailed hand-drawn 1611 map by John Speed, held by the National Library of Scotland. It's
pretty cool.
It makes a great last-minute gift, and they even have couple packs that come with adjoining plots of land. The first 200 plots bought via our link will all be put together within a few minutes of each other next to the Kings and Generals plot. So act fast to join our little union of forest territories. Check out their Black Friday sale for discounts. Plus, if you use our code KINGS, you'll get an extra 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/kings to get yourself a title or give it as a gift and help support the channel. Italy was first unified when a young Roman republic finished conquering the peninsula in the 200s BC, and for the next 700 years would remain united as the heartland of a mighty empire. Even after the western half of the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, the regimes of Odoacer, the Ostrogoths, and Justinian's Eastern Roman Empire ruled as the sole masters of the peninsula, save for periods of transition between them. This, however, would change with the invasion of the Lombards in 568, a centuries-long process which saw Italy split into 2 spheres of power, one ruled by the Lombard dukes and another by Byzantine officials in conjunction with the Pope in Rome. This division was further entrenched with the conquest of the Lombard kingdom by the Frankish king Charlemagne in 776, and the establishment of the Kingdom of Italy within the Carolingian Empire. By the end of the 9th century, northern and central division was further entrenched with the conquest of the Lombard kingdom by the Frankish king Charlemagne in 776, and the establishment of the Kingdom of Italy within the Carolingian Empire. By the end of the 9th century, northern and central Italy was well consolidated under the rule of the Carolingian kings, who also exerted great influence over a nascent papal state. Meanwhile, the south of Italy was geopolitically defined by a...
I always wondered how they allowed the papal state to have a territory that cuts Italy in two, rather than just kind of hugging the coast in Rome and the Vatican, and then having this as Frankish,
constantly fluctuating power struggle between the Eastern Roman Empire, remnant Lombard principalities, and various Muslim states, which would endure up until the 11th century, when the Normans would unify southern Italy under their overlordship. After the death of the Carolingian Emperor Charles the Fat in 888, northern and central Italy collapsed into a period of civil war, where the great magnates of the realm vied for the crown of the Kingdom of Italy. The victors of this struggle were a Saxon dynasty, the Ottonians, who were crowned kings of Italy in 962, thus bringing the heartland of the Latins under the rule of Germanic emperors. It is in these years that the origins of the Italian city-states, the type of government that would dominate the region for the following centuries, would emerge. Italy had been extremely urbanized during the Roman Empire. While the overall population of these cities had suffered during the early Middle Ages, the cities themselves mostly survived. Due to needing to administer to other regions in their empire, the Ottonian emperors were often absent from the Italian peninsula, and would thus...
Well, they have the Alps that is going to be really big. I'm not sure how the height of the Alps kind of tapers off down here, and maybe there are sort of valley crossways into Italy from Germany.
Make use of the bishops of Italy, who were based in the cities, to administer the region in
Wait, what?
The Ottonian emperors were often absent from the Italian peninsula, and would thus make use of the bishops of Italy, who were based in the cities, to administer the region in their stead. To help them in their task and to ensure taxes reached imperial coffers, numerous imperial privileges, including the ability to control taxation, trade, and land rights, were delegated by the Ottonian emperors to the urban bishops of Italy. Consequently, the cities these bishops ruled from grew in political and economic importance. Much like the rest of Europe, Italy had a caste of feudal nobles. But with the movement of political power to the towns, the traditional style of land-owning nobles in Italy were either marginalized or had to move to the cities to maintain their importance. Although the cities of Italy nominally owed their allegiance to the Ottonian emperors, their effective control over the peninsula was never particularly strong, for the emperor could only directly govern the region when he was physically present, something he could not do often, as he had to spend most of his time keeping his German territories in line. This was true both for the Ottonians and their successors, the Salians, who not only exercised little direct control over Italy, but ended up embroiling themselves in a 50-year-long conflict with the papacy, known as the Investiture Controversy. It is during the tumultuous reign of the Salians that a breakdown of the remnant of imperial administration in Italy took place, and by the start of the 12th century, imperial palaces and administration in Italy were in complete ruin. During the second half of the 11th century, a slow transfer of power occurred in Italy's cities, wherein the power accrued by the bishops began transferring to the citizenry. This transfer was facilitated by the Investiture Controversy, where during the feud between the Pope and the Emperor, many northern and central Italian bishops and their powerful vassals supported the Emperor, which ended up with many of them being excommunicated or being deposed. This diminishment of church power allowed new social groups to emerge. This process was expedited by the Holy Roman Emperors of the first half of the 12th century, who continued to concede privileges to some Italian towns in order to avoid needing to travel there and rule them themselves. These political developments, which took place mainly between 1080 and 1130, allowed the majority of Italian towns, in different ways and forms, to give themselves new institutions and elect consuls that would rule the city with an assembly, resulting in the rise of the medieval Italian commune. To be able to survive as an urban entity in the Middle Ages, Italian cities...
I'm not going to make a communist joke. I'm past that.
To be able to survive as an urban entity in the Middle Ages, Italian cities needed an economic base that could support their urban population, a base that had developed in the previous centuries. At the end of the High Middle Ages, between the 9th and 11th centuries, Europe saw a general improvement in its prosperity. The land became mostly safer as the raids of Vikings and Magyars ceased, while the use of watermills became more widespread and the extraction and production of iron improved. Moreover, agricultural output rose with the introduction of better tools, such as the heavy plow and the harrow, while the expanding use of the triennial crop rotation system, where fields would produce 2 harvests every 3 years instead of 1 every 2, increased the area of land that yielded produce. Together with the increase of arable land and a more favorable climate, these elements caused a surplus of food production that allowed for the support of a bigger population. As a result, Europe grew from a population of 20 million in the 13th century to 70 million in 1350. This economic and
I'm not trying to say that new farming techniques wouldn't have a drastic impact on population. Obviously, it would. It's just over triple your population of a continent in less than 150 years. That's insane. I'm saying less than 150 years because it said 13th century, probably not early. So I'm just,
population growth
1200s. Unless it was 1200, okay, up to 150 years. That's still insane.
took place in all of Europe, and Italy was no exception. As Italy's agricultural production system changed, so did its society. During the
That seems like an increase in population that only something like penicillin could allow. I didn't realize that population was that much hindered by food rather than, food and disease, or not knowledgeable about disease or whatnot. Does that make sense?
The Italian agricultural landscape was centered around big villas owned by great landlords or monasteries. However, the breakdown of imperial power in the peninsula created a new group of elites in the countryside, the milites, mounted soldiery, who were originally the vassals of counts or dukes legitimized by the emperors to help keep control over the territory. After the decline of imperial power, these milites struck out on their own, creating small power bases in the countryside by use of force, often around the many castles that had been built to defend against the raids coming from outside of Italy. This new armed presence in the Italian countryside drove some peasants to urban centers to escape oppression, while at the same time, the new military elite would themselves move to the cities, which they recognized as the true centers of power, further bolstering their populations. Another factor contributing to the growth of city life at this time was the fact that landlords had begun demanding that the peasants who worked their land pay them with coin rather than with crops, as they had previously been required to. To acquire this coin, farmers had to sell their produce in the cities, which brought more food there to sustain the growing population. Between the years 1100 and 1350, Italy was the most urbanized region in Europe, having 3 cities with more than 100,000 inhabitants, while 60 others had a population between 10 and 80,000. The increase of population in these cities allowed for a boom in small businesses of artisans, increasing the production of specialized goods, which, with the circulation of coins in the countryside and the improvement of extraction of raw materials like lumber and minerals, increased mercantile activities not just within the Italian cities themselves, but also the greater European and Mediterranean area. During this time,
Isn't Columbus from Genoa, or wasn't he?
A new class of artisans, merchants, administrators, and lawyers emerged, who would become the backbone of the communal institutions that developed in the following centuries. At the same time, the use of standardized currency increased, as it was in these decades that the maritime republics began to expand their commerce overseas. To maintain their power and to get access to the resources needed to facilitate further urban expansion, it was crucial for Italian city-states to expand and maintain control over the contado, the neighboring territory that often comprised the dioceses of the local bishop or old feudal counties. The territorial expansion and consolidation undergone by Italian cities was a slow and heterogeneous process which varied from place to place and also depended on the subjects present in the the territory. Villages created rural communes to govern themselves and contrast the power of the rural nobility, over whom the cities expanded their influence by sending officials to collect taxes and entering into agreements. Feudal lords would often be invited to become citizens of the town, and thus having to be subject to its laws and swear an oath of loyalty in exchange for keeping privileges and rights in their lands. Other ways city-states expanded their territorial influence included cases where one of its prominent citizens bought an old noble title and with it its land. If all that failed, military conquest was a possibility, but this was a rare occurrence. Overall, as the prominent cities of Italy began casting out their webs of influence, it created various degrees of local autonomy and different administrations within the borders of their communes, bringing further complications to the political map. Differences in administration were also present at a regional level. For example, places like Lombardy, Veneto, and Emilia featured bigger cities controlling larger territories, which relied on old feudal-style landed nobility for the development of the communal institutions. Meanwhile, the region of Liguria was dominated by the powerful city of Genoa, which subjugated the other coastal towns in the region. In Piedmont, the region was dominated by many rural lordships, in particular the nobles of Savoy.
So Venice and Genoa are just like in the two armpits of Italy, the Adriatic and then the Mediterranean over here. It makes sense, being at the head. I know Venice, like I always say, this is at the head of a giant valley in Upper Italy.
Montferrat and Saluzzo, and the towns did not manage to obtain the same level of authority except for the center of Asti. Tuscany and Emilia were other regions in which cities didn't gain as much political dominance, as they were home to a great number of small feudal lords who managed to keep
and they don't have a coastline or
their independence. In central Italy, the Papal State managed to expand its rule over a great number of towns, but like with the emperors, this control depended greatly on the political situation and the strength of the current pope. Other ecclesial states, like the Patriarch of Aquileia and the Bishop of Trent, consolidated their rule over their large dioceses. Finally, Sardinia was divided into 4 judicati, while southern Italy and Sicily had been unified by the Normans, although their powerful kingdom would become a hotbed of dynastic conflict once their ruling line, the Hautevils, died out. Although the political fragmentation of Italy was well established by the 1150s, there were still those who tried, mostly in vain, to unify the peninsula. Most famously, Emperor Frederick Barbarossa spent many decades warring against the cities of the Lombard League to strip away the many rights and privileges that in the emperor's eyes had been wrongly appropriated by the towns without imperial approval. He would find initial success.
We didn't say you could do that. That's pretty much
culminating with the Territorial approval. He would find initial success, culminating with the destruction of Milan in 1162. Still, the other communes continued to rebel until the emperor was defeated at the Battle of Legnano, forcing him to compromise with the towns and recognize their autonomy. Barbarossa's grandson, Frederick II, would also attempt to expand his influence over the towns unsuccessfully, and after his death, the authority of the imperial crown collapsed, allowing the Italian states to continue developing with minimal imperial interference. Around the middle of the 14th century, some of the more powerful Italian urban centers, like Milan and Florence, began to expand at the expense of their neighbors, followed by Venice at the start of the 1400s, which took control of the regions of Veneto and Friuli. Despite this, by the year 1454, when the Peace of Lodi was signed, there were still around 120 more or less independent states in Italy, and while their numbers would gradually dwindle down in the following centuries, it was only during the Italian unification wars of the 19th century that the Italian peninsula, with the exception of San Marino and the Vatican State, would be unified. Thanks again to our sponsor, Established Titles. Buy a small plot of land in Scotland and become a lady or a lord.
really cool video. Yeah, it definitely helped out a lot. As much as one can do in a 17-minute video. But really interesting. I'd like to learn, honestly, from where this left off, kind of to the reunification of Italy, because he kind of went from mid 15th century to the reunification. But there's stuff like the Renaissance that, you know, you think of Italy, you know, with Da Vinci and Michelangelo and all of these different names that I know well. I've kind of known my entire life, but never knew much about them. You know, like the names are very familiar, but I can't really tell you anything about voice crack, about them. So I'd like to do that. I hope you guys all learned something or can teach me something in the comments. And I hope you're all doing well. I really do. If not, chin up. You'll be good soon. Don't worry. Bye, guys.